This is a Viva PR podcast.
In every niche of business, there is a podcast that's a leading light where a PR agency should be aspiring to. What other platform guarantees you an audience that's interested in what you're talking about? The most powerful form of building trust with a client is your voice. That's a podcast. We'll just set up some mics and we'll have a bit of a chat and away we go. It's like, no, it's a lot of legwork. You're not going to get on Joe Rogan. Not unless you're like famous, and if you're famous, you shouldn't be talking to me.
Hello and welcome to PR in the Real World, the podcast that lifts the lid on how the PR industry really works. We're all about real people, real challenges and practical insights you can actually use. And today's guest, Stewart Townsend, ticks all the boxes. He's a technologist who founded a great tool called Podcast Hawk. If you want to get your client a guest slot on a podcast, look no further. He's also been a guest on over 50 podcasts, so today I'm under pressure. That's the big build-up done. Shall we crack on? So, Stuart, welcome to PR in the Real World. Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about all things podcasting. But before we get into that, can you just introduce yourself in terms of like the world of podcasting, how you got involved and your expertise in this field?
Yeah, of course. And it's great to actually be doing a podcast in person. It's so rare. It's amazing. So background is, it was around about 3 years or so ago now. It'll be a bit of a long-winded story, but I'll cut it short. So basically, I'm part of this group called Dynamite Circle, which is come out of a podcast, Tropical MBA, that's been going about 14 years. And it's a bizarre group of crazy people that get together a couple of times a year in places like Bangkok and Mexico. And I met a chap in there that I've known for a long time, and we were just talking about ideas. And we came up with this concept of Podcast Hawk, which is we both wanted to promote our businesses. He had a language business, I had a consulting business, and we both enjoyed being on podcasts. Just found it really hard to find host details and what the podcasts were about and how many episodes it had and that sort of thing. So he was a bit of a coder, I was a bit of a hustler, and we hacked this thing together and we created this little product called Podcast Hawk, and it was to solve our own itch. It was like, literally, we want to be on podcasts, so we started to use it, and that was 3 years ago. So it was like being immersed in that world then. So people like Sam Sethi, Podland News, all those sort of guys, know all them, and it's one of those unsung, you can use it in marketing or sales or whatever sector, but people think of podcasts of, I'm going to sleep, I'll listen to a comedy. I'm going for a long drive, I'll listen to a book. They don't think of it outside that context. That's the long-winded how we got here story.
And from that, has that led to you being a bit of a podcast regular on different podcasts? Or
It did, yeah. Unfortunately, life gets busy and challenges of multiple hats. I've not done as much of this lately. And it's ironic because when we first started, it was eat your own dog food. So it was literally, we were using the product to go on podcasts to promote our business. Then we were using the product to go and promote the product and getting on those podcasts. And I think Ray's on about 100, 125 podcasts. I've been on about 50 or 60 now.
Right.
But that's, considering what we do, we should be on a lot more.
Wow, I'll have to be on my best behaviour today then, because I'm just a mere junior in your kind of presence. So let's look at the world of podcasting, because it seems to have exploded in the last 4 or 5 years, longer even. But what are the kind of biggest advantages for businesses and PR professionals in leveraging podcasts for brands and doing brand building and audience engagement, do you think?
So, for me, as a platform, I'm going to do Harry an injustice now. A friend of mine called Harry, can't remember your second name, so sorry, Harry. He's run a large company for the last 10 years that builds podcasts for brands. Yeah. It's something street. It will come to me. We'll put it in the show notes. And I was like, when I first met him, I was like, well, that's a bit niche, isn't it? But actually, when you unravel it and you unpick it, so internal podcasts or external, for brand building, it's the best mechanism of getting, I'll talk a lot about this today, about getting your voice across as trust. So as a brand, you're out there, Procter & Gamble, Vodafone, whoever you are, you've got a brand that you're representing. And normally it's imagery, isn't it? It's a powerful image and you remember.
Yeah.
The most powerful form of building trust with a client, a customer, a friend, is your voice.
Right.
Because people listen to your voice.
Yeah.
They look in your eyes and listen to your voice. It's two components of life. So a powerful image is great, but you'll see the most powerful images. I was at Apple last week and they played some adverts, some older adverts, and it was the imagery, but the voice, the tone of the voice that was talking through the Christmas celebrations, whatever it is. And that's for me, is like Harry's hit it on the nail on the head. Brands are missing a trick. You know, they have. So when I worked in corporate, we had really great spokespeople, and you went press training and all that sort of palaver. You didn't really get a chance to talk to people that much and represent the brand, apart from standing up and talking about the latest widgets. And that's where brands should be really embracing podcasts, because what other platform guarantees you an audience that's interested in what you're talking about? Yeah. It's you don't listen to a podcast because you like fly fishing. If you like fly fishing, you listen to the podcast. Yeah. If you don't like fly fishing, you don't. I listen to random ones about cars and bizarre stuff.
Yeah, you've got that niche interest that's served. So you're obviously a kind of keen advocate of the voice and the podcasting tool. Then
I've got a great voice for radio, apparently.
You and me both. I hate listening to myself, but hey-ho. So how do you think PR agencies can better integrate with podcast appearances and shoehorn them into broader media campaigns? Getting them into their kind of mindset rather than just being seen as this little niche thing sideline.
Yeah, I think it's got to be part of the overall strategy, hasn't it? It's got to be, when you talk as an agency, you know, you're on the other side there, you're talking to a client, it's putting all those mediums in front of them, but how do you segment them together? So it could be that you've got an article in for that client in the Times and it's amazing, it's great stuff. How do you do a follow-on from that? How do you smash it?
Yeah.
So it's like, do you get them on a podcast that's relevant to their sector that is... You know, we'll talk about Joe Rogan. So everyone's been on Joe Rogan show. But in every niche of business or any sector or any brand, there is a podcast that's a leading light where a PR agency should be aspiring to.
Yeah.
When I've worked with agencies in the past through the podcast or through the software company, they've very much gone, we need to be on Joe Rogan. It's like, yeah, but with if you look at the data, that's not necessarily where your audience is.
Yeah.
It's about taking that forward and finding your voice on that audience.
Yeah, we work with B2B manufacturers, for example.
Yeah.
And you know, they know that where their audience is within trade publications or within other media, but they're very kind of focused that, you know, getting stuff on Sky News, for example, might be great for egos and politics in the boardroom, but ain't necessarily going to shift the dial when it comes to selling more stuff or getting more orders in. Whereas the more targeted approach,
that's it. It's like I'm going to give the game away now. I started live selling steel when I was 18. I worked in we won't go there. But a chap that's in this dynamite circle with me, Pete, he's still in the steel sector, and he has a podcast interview. You know, it sounds dull as dishwater. It's like interviewing people that sell steel. It's like whatever, but that audience is small, but they're all interested in what that person's got to say and what they're trying to position. It's that aspect, and that's the key component, is putting it into a campaign plan so it's all aligned and there's a messaging. So, you know, the trade publication is one area, but is there other podcasts where people can have a voice in a discussion? Is there something controversial? But keep it including that campaign. But again, like you say, Tony, you know, a lot of agencies just think of it as a sideline or something. They've got to do a tick a box. It's like, no, there's got to be a plan.
Yeah. No, interesting. I mean, and talking about a plan, there's also got to be a return on that plan.
Yeah.
And how do you measure that? Because, I mean, some of the stuff that you've done with Podcast Talk is interesting around, you know, rating shows and their influence and the numbers, but it's quite a difficult field to kind of understand what the numbers are actually telling you, or to even get at any numbers.
So we create this platform. Sorry, it's not a sales pitch. It's just the mentality. So podcasting is difficult in terms of, so you're a host of a podcast. You have access to your download data and all of that. I can't see that. It's never been publicly available. So people talk a lot about it, but it's, we'll say it's misrepresented is the best way. We've always positioned it as, so I've been on the show today. My return is, will there be a link? So a backlink, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But actually what I want to see is your audience. So not the downloads, not how many people listen to it. It's more your engagement of that content when it goes out, and how many of your audience engage with it. Because your audience are in the box. They're in the box that I want to talk to.
Yeah.
That's the key measurement. So web traffic, social traffic, all the standard marketing measurements you would use for an engagement and activities. That's where we count that. So it'd be marrying that with things like SEO data or Majestic data and sort of topic categorization, all these sort of key things. But it's just about, podcast went live, what was the impact? So it started at A, what was the impact at B, C and D as it moved along? And then it's evergreen as well. That's the return that you want to measure, or we measure as well.
Yeah.
Because there could be, the Joe Rogan podcast is out there and it's amazing. But in your sector, there's an equivalent, and you think, I've got to be on that show.
Yeah.
But actually, there's somebody up and coming that's got better marketing reach, social reach, more voice than anybody on the planet, but they've only done 10 episodes. Yeah. You need to be on that show with 10 episodes, because that's when you're going to get your return.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, we have another kind of metric here, and it's a dead simple one. It's about the relationships that we nurture and create. So nurture's one where we might already know somebody, but having them as a guest will be a chance to kind of reignite that relationship, or it's an opportunity to reach out and create new ones. And ours is a relationship game.
Yeah.
You know, in the long term, we are built on the relationships that we've developed over the years.
I worked with a client, and we were just talking about being a guest. I said, so, go and be a guest for X amount of episodes, get started, cut your teeth in a sense, because you've not done this before. But in their sector and where they were selling into, I did that same mentality. It was turn it the other way, run your own podcast, run a LinkedIn campaign, not saying, do you want to buy my product? It's the best thing since sliced bread. It's like, come on podcast, because we'd like a perspective on what your thoughts are in the sector. Yeah. And then it's sponsored by your software company. It's the best, simplest sales methodology of building a relationship direct with people straight away. Yeah. Not just to convert them into a sales aspect, but just to build that relationship and sector knowledge and build it out. It's dead simple. Again, it comes back to the voice, trust, that interaction around it. And the fact that when we're talking today and you say to me at the end, is there any more guests or more people? Suddenly it's like, oh, that's my network of widening it out just for 30 minutes a time. What other mechanism can do this for 30 minutes of conversation?
I'm a true believer, obviously. Yeah. I mean, for businesses targeting specific niche industries, I mean, we or customer segments, how do you recommend they go about identifying the best podcasts to be on? What can they do?
A bit simple answer.
Yeah. Obviously, podcast.org is an option. But
there's services like ours, but I think, again, it's just sort of the best way to do it and start it is listening to podcasts. Right. Is one thing. So if you haven't done that, but just start to look at the categorization, because again, podcast categorization is really wide. So we'll go back to the steel sector. That'll probably be a podcast that's in business. Yeah. But it's going to be really hard to find that. Yeah. If you're in the steel sector, it's going to be hidden away somewhere down there. Yeah. But it's spending that time and listening to what we call lookalike audiences. So you listen to 5 or 10 podcasts in your sector. We'll say HR, human resources, whatever the title is nowadays, people management or something. Start to listen to them. And what you need to identify is the types of podcasts that you're interested in or that you'd like to produce.
Yeah.
Because there's different styles. So this is an interview style, or there could be just that weekly, we're mates, we're going to have a chat about stuff and what's happening. Or there could be a blend, a hybrid model around it.
Yeah, there's those 10-minute tip ones where it's just somebody blurting out, 10, 15 minutes of the expert knowledge.
Yeah. There's not sort of a box that says, like a blog post, I'll do 2,000 words and do all this stuff. It's like with a podcast, it can be whatever you want it to be. There'll be video, there'll be audio, how you want to produce it, whatever. But yeah, get started and understand where that comfy spot is, what you think would resonate. Because if you're a business, you know who your customers are and you know the type of people they are as well. Around that. So who would actually benefit from listening to that? Would it be an interview style where you're bringing experts in? It's an educational component. So you need to start there. That's the first sort of starting point. And that you can find that anyway, some general searches and stuff.
And in terms of being a guest, if you're invited to be a guest on a podcast, what tips would you give somebody? I mean, you've sat in that hot seat a few times. So what are the pitfalls and what tips would you give people?
So we always say there's loads of documentation and we can fathom it down is like be prepared.
Right, yeah.
Know who you're talking to, because I've had it the other way where I've been on a podcast and the host hasn't known what they're asking or what they're doing because they're just starting out, bless them. But as a guest, it's like you have to think this person is inviting you into their home and bringing their family and friends with you to listen. So be prepared and be knowledgeable about what you're going to talk about. So if you've put forward, I have a PhD in maths and in physics and I can talk about space, and you can't, you've just wasted everybody's time.
Yeah.
And also just do a little bit of testing, be a bit articulate on a microphone, see how your voice sounds. I talk very quietly, so I always sort of say raise my levels a little bit around that, and try and when you're going on that episode again, it may be an international audience, you've got to bear that in mind. So again, try and slow tone down. It's just thinking about that press training type of thing you'd go through, or any of that, or just having a conversation. It's that preparation perspective. And don't mean this in a horrible way, because you're prepared. Make the host work as well. Yeah. So request, what time is it? Have you sent me the link? Have we got a set of questions? What's the structure? Yeah. How would you? Is it video? Do you want me to come, or shall I wear my pajamas? Or it's those sort of things. So treat it as a professional engagement that you're going through, and don't just rock up thinking, it's just whatever, 30 minutes. You've got to be passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's really got to come through. It's interesting what you say about that it goes international. This goes into 30, 40 countries now, which amazes me. But I sometimes wonder what they make of my Bolton accent. But it hasn't held Peter Kay back, has it? So
no, exactly.
Hey ho. So let's talk about podcast talk. I mean, just fundamentally, how does it work from a PR agency perspective, and what other tools are out there that you're competing against, or is there anything that you're competing against?
Yeah, there's a couple. So basically, Podcast Hawk is a database of all the podcast shows, index, not the episodes. We do have that, we just don't index them. And it's just a search engine in front of it, so you can search for finding podcasts by category, keywords. What's the gender of the host, what's the location of the podcast, all that sort of thing. So it's very simplified search engine for podcasts. The added component is that we have the email address and the social handles of the host as well, so you can get in touch, and it's automated. So write some emails in the platform, boom, it goes off through your email address. It simplifies that.
So if you're a PR and you're looking to get your client on a particular stream of podcasts, it's an easy way of approaching those guys.
Rather than Googling, going through Apple, checking all the different sort of components, it's like you log in, put a keyword in, human resources, and it can list all the podcasts, and then you can filter them down and really target and say, well, actually, I want a Spanish-speaking female host type podcast. Boom, right, okay. How many of those are in the world?
Right.
Hundreds. So you can do that. And yeah, there's a couple of other similar ones. So Raphonic. I'm sorry, Raphonic. I forgot your name again. I'm having a bad name day. Really good chap. He's done that, and he's done a couple other products. And then there's Podchaser, but they're a massive organisation. But I suppose us and Raphonic are in that sort of similar hustle, and it was to solve a problem. We both built it to solve a niche and a problem. We just come in it both from different ways. And then when we built the platform, we built an agency model as well. So actually, as an agency, you can have different seats, and you can have clients segmented and all that sort of enterprisey type stuff.
Interesting. And how's it been received by the industry then?
And so from a guest side, and actually no, to be fair, from a host side, really well as well. To be honest, I can't think in 3 years we've had a host reach out and complain because it doesn't say email sent by Podcast Hawk. It goes through your email address. Yeah. But when I've been on shows and they're like, "Why are you here?" I'm like talking about podcasting. It's like Podcast Hawk. Oh, good. Yeah. So you help people actually find the shows they want to be on rather than this random scattergun approach of, I've got a client, he's called Bob, he's really good, and you should be on the show. It's like it helps segment those out so people can find the shows and actually write a really good outreach proposition rather than just those.
So what are the kind of mistakes people make when they're first reaching out to try and get people on shows? What do you think the two?
It's care and attention, exactly what I've just said. It's literally so one of our advisors is Pat Flynn, so well-known podcaster, and Jordan Harbinger as well. And we talk to them quite a lot in the outset of what really annoys them as hosts. And it is those emails that have just basically have been written as like a cold email in sales. It's like I say, I've got a client, they're called Bob, they're the CEO of a really big company. They should be on your show because they're a CEO of a big company. It's just a turn off. For me, it's just about, if you want to be a guest on podcasts, if you're working in an agency and you want to promote your agency, or you've got a client, you've always got to think. So I'm, coming on today is, this sounds a bit wrong, isn't it? Not that I don't care about you, Tony, I love you. What I do care about is your audience.
Yes.
If I'm going to come here, can I add value to that audience? Is it going to be interesting to them? Because if not, there's no point in being here, is there?
No.
And as a guest, you should always be thinking about that audience, is there something they can take away from you going on that show, and then put that in a story, in a position, and make it easy for the host to go, right, okay, so Stuart, he worked in this and he did that. He's been on shows before. He sent me some references of podcasts he's been on. He sent me a little media kit. He sent me everything I need so I can tick, tick, tick and go, yeah, he's okay. I've done my research already. Yeah. It's when people just think that they have no consideration. Some people do it for love, some people do it as a business, but they have no consideration about that host client audience, not the clients, the host audience. And that's a key factor in all of this. Yeah. Without any of that, we wouldn't be here.
No, that's true. Yeah. We do have listeners.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the whole reason of doing it is listeners, and people want to share stories. So Jordan interviews people and they share stories on there. Pat's talking about how entrepreneurs have done X, Y, Z, but it's all about interesting stories and interesting dynamics that can be shared with the audience. That then they go, I remember listening to Pat Flynn when he used to drive down to London on Monday morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, get a Reading or wherever. And it was literally, I'd be like, I want to stop and write some notes.
Yeah.
If you can do that, and when you listen to a podcast, you make sure you want to stop. It's like, that was a really good guest. That was I've learned something. That's what you should be thinking.
That's interesting. And let's flip it again. So, we've got to understand what it takes to pull together a podcast. What's your advice to people who might be thinking, oh, yeah, I think I could do that. It seems simple.
Don't. So again, but totally biased, this is why we always say to people, go and be a guest first. because you're calling, like, you know, I don't have a face for radio, face for TV. I've got a voice for radio, whatever the saying is. You're calling, maybe you're really good at talking about your experiences and that sort of thing, but being a host is a different position, because you're asking the questions, you're steering the conversation, but you're thinking, is this of interest to the audience? 2, yeah, as a host, you could set it up with a mic and some low-cost equipment to get started, environment. But you'll see the trend. We see it with the data. It's around about 15 episodes now. It used to be 10. 15 episodes is the cut-off point. If people get past 15, I'm like, oh, I'll come on your show then, because it's going to at least get published. Below 15 is normally where people just realise it's a lot of legwork. So even just that, setting out the questions, being prepared, it's not just turn up, rock up on Zoom or in person and start asking. It's a lot of that. And then there's post-editing as well. Yeah, there's a lot of AI tools that could, help now and remove my ums and ahs and all that sort of thing. But there's still the intro and outro and making it slick and checking the audio levels. It's not, it's challenging. It's something you have to think about. And you have to think, why am I doing it? I'm doing it for love, doing it for business. What's my objective?
We now know how many hours a 1 hour episode will take, and the amount of manpower that's needed to deliver that, and the skills that you need to do it as well.
And it's probably before you started, you were of the same sort of ilk of like, that's a podcast. We'll just set up some mics and we'll have a bit of a chat and away we go.
And we've learned along the way, and we're still learning. But I think it's an interesting one for people to get involved in.
It is. And again, as a business or a PR agency or an individual, there's still different barriers to jump through. So, you know, Harry's, we'll call him Harry Jump Street. Harry's working with big brands who are building internal podcasts. Fantastic. But then that has to go through a process of, have we said something that we shouldn't have said? And is there some of the tick box and such around that? And then sometimes you'll get guests that come on and like, oh, actually, can we retract that? Oh, I don't really have a process for doing that. It's that sort of component. As you do more and more, you realise there's certain nuances and elements that you have to put into your like editing process or whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. There's far more to it. And then there's all the promotion of it. You know, you want to do this to get listeners interested, and you need to try and find methods of reaching out to them, and you know. So
it's that component of like, it goes live and you sat there. It's like opening the corner shop into just open a new shop. Brilliant. Any customers? No, but I've opened it. It's like, people don't just flock there and find you. You have to then do the legwork afterwards to get it out to that audience and start to build that trust with them around that. And then rethinking about how do we repurpose this content as well, so we can put it in audio snippets and we can do reels and all that. But are we putting? It's not just a fire and forget, solve every problem on the planet type of thing.
No, that's interesting. I just want to go back to something you said just earlier about it being 15 episodes is a kind of tipping point. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I think this might be episode 15.
Oh, that's a bit.
Or 16.
Oh, 16. Oh, we're okay. We're all right. I'm going live. It's not a wasted trip. So what we've found over the years, looking at the data, is, so we call it like the stepladder approach as a guest. It's like, you're not going to get on Joe Rogan, not unless you're like famous. And if you're famous, you shouldn't be talking to me. You should be on Joe Rogan. So we say it used to be 10 episodes, but now it's 15. So what happens is, with the amount of effort you can see here just to produce it, even if you did this at home sort of thing and edited it on Zoom and such, people get to a point where they're really motivated for the first couple, and then it's hard to get guests originally because it's like you don't exist, so you're reaching out to your network. Then it gets a bit cyclic and it gets a little bit easier. But they realise that hours of time and effort, but they haven't set out a clear objective. Why am I doing this? I love cars, so I'm chatting about cars. After 10 episodes, I love cars, but do I really love cars that much? It's like, it's a lot of time and effort. And I'm doing it because I love cars, but I'm not going to get any benefits out of that. It's slightly changed now because those figures were skewed a lot by COVID. So in COVID, there was, I can't remember the number top of my head, but the percentage increase in podcasts just went through the roof. It went crazy. It's stabilised now back to a normalised level. of shows released, and that's why that bar has been set a bit higher, where people are now doing more like 15 episodes plus type of thing, and then traction's growing around that. But it all boils back down to that component of, have they got the energy and passion to carry it through, and what's the rationale behind doing it, and what's the plan around it?
I mean, we stepped up from being a fortnightly show to being a weekly show because I thought that would be something that the listener would kind of expect and demand, and to get that kind of loyalty back from them, that they want to have that certainty of when this is going to drop and so on. Yeah,
looking at I'm not looking at it now, obviously, but just I can see the data in front of me. You tend to see there's a lot of shift from bi-weekly shows into weekly to gain that traction, that trust. So again, COVID skewed a lot of the figures and the numbers because the data was not normalised. But a lot of people were just like, I'll just do it every 2 weeks. I'll record a batch of 4 shows. It's bi-weekly. It's like anything, though. If you watch TV, I'm watching Reacher at the moment. Every Thursday night, it's like, Reacher night, yeah, it's great. It's a weekly thing. If it was bi-weekly, it'd be, is Reacher on? I can't remember. Is it week 1 or week 2?
You don't get that habit, do you? It doesn't form that habit thing.
And it's like with Pat Flynn and the guys that first started, they always did a drop on a certain day every week.
Yeah.
Apart from John Lee Dumas, that did one every day because he was crazy. But it's that regularity. When you start to push it out, the only way you could do, even then when you look at seasonal type podcasts, it comes to, you've got to remember, it's when season 2, and there's got to be a lot of passion behind it.
Yeah.
So I think, again, that dropping time and having that regularity and keeping it weekly, etc., definitely helps increase traction and audience retention as well.
Yeah. When we set this up, we made certain that we were on Apple and Spotify and YouTube. And what surprised me is that YouTube seems to be the channel that everyone's got. And I brought my own kind of prejudices in there because I think I'm an Apple podcast devotee. Yeah. But obviously the rest of the world is shifted to YouTube or already on there. Is that across the board,
definitely.
Or are we?
It was one of the most featured requests we had about 18 months ago. What year are we in now? 2025. 18 months ago was the ability to filter podcasts by their YouTube channel, so we could get the social link for their YouTube channel, include that in our filtering. Right. So because people particularly wanted to find podcasts that would but predominantly had a YouTube following. And again, we see that in the data. You'll see that with all the podcasting reporting. Ironically, not so much podcasts with video content on there. No. It's the audio with audiograms and such. Yeah. People are still listening to that like I do in my car or at home or whatever it may be. It's just another distribution channel, but it's a large distribution channel, most definitely.
Yeah, no, and it seems to be a fundamental. So let's have a look to get the crystal ball out, Stuart. What kind of emerging trends or technology do you see coming down the line that's going to impact on the world of podcasting? And do you think we're at a high point, or is it going to grow further?
I don't think we're at the high point yet. I think we saw an artificial high point, and now we're actually seeing more of a business use case scenario, and people sort of seeing it as another marketing channel, another methodology to go through and get that insight. Definitely what you're seeing now is more use of technology. So again, coming back to our favourite acronym of the day, AI, internationalisation. So now it's like, oh, really? Do you want it in French? Yeah, I can do it in French. So it's just, and it started with the YouTubes doing this. It was like literally going, well, I've got this content, but I've got an audience that can see my demographics that are coming in from elsewhere, but it's not in natural language. Yeah. Suddenly, Stuart can speak Brazilian. It's like, great. I've seen definitely a lot more of that, giving more scope and width. Because again, those charts, coming back to manipulating figures, those charts are segmented by language. So there'll be a chart for Spain, chart for French, etc., Spanish. So it gives you that reach as a podcaster, not just to being natural and going the other way. So it's like if it's a really highly rated Spanish speaking podcast, boom, let's have that converted into English and do that as well. So seeing some trends around internationalization and reach from that side, most definitely that's starting to become easier and more prevalent. And again, different mechanisms, routes to market. So YouTube is definitely soaring up there.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, the demographics are definitely changing. You're starting to see a young, I don't want to know what generation, whatever it is, but a younger audience getting attached to podcasts now, which it's really bizarre. So depending on what country it is, but you're seeing an age range of a younger audience all the way through to like my mum.
Yeah.
It's not a narrow field of ages. It's spread across such a wide span. It's unbelievable.
So when you say young, what age range are we talking?
14 plus, 16 plus teenagers, not just the 25 sort of demographics you start to see. And again, I don't know if that's swayed. I've not really looked into the data lately, whether it's gaming type podcasts and that sort of thing, but definitely a wider audience. And again, podcasts aren't just us talking. There's zombie shows, criminal shows. There's all, if you go to a podcast event where actually they're doing like a live show, literally they're packed out, like 20,000 people, 10,000 people, whatever size it may be. They will sell tickets and do a city tour, and it's like an underground theatre. You don't know about it unless you know about it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's. I mean, the spin-off of The Rest Is Politics. They sell out.
Yeah, just literally
venues across the country, don't they? And, and who would have thought? Two middle-aged guys talking about politics would have such a kind of audience.
Well, it's like if you go to London podcast event, that's April, is it? Is it next month or the month after? Yeah. And then they have spin-off shows around it. Again, those are all sold out. Yeah. And then you have the Podcast Awards back end in winter, and they do a bit. Again, it's just... But it's one of those areas of like... It's like anything, isn't it? If you know about it, you know what's going on. Otherwise, you just walk past it and be oblivious to the fact that there's lots of people in that audience, in that theatre there, watching, listening, engaged in a podcast.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And well, finally, let's look at Podcast Talk itself. Is there any kind of plans to, change that or tweak it along the way? And what does the future hold for that?
So at the moment, just going through a project where essentially, so we've got data on it's not going to be episode data. So we've got the data on the show and the host, and then we've got social data around that. And bringing in more backlink, more marketing type data, essentially topic categorization. So we can categorize shows better by the content that they're producing and their social network reach, if that makes sense. So we'll take your show and we'll look at the social links and who's following, all those sort of things, and then build that into a model with an external data source, and it will categorize it and go, oh, it's about PR, marketing, expert knowledge, etc. So that people can come and search and go, actually, I really want to find shows that aren't just about business, but they're about PR in business or marketing in business. And they have people that, they have an audience that are receptive and know about this and can talk about it. And then we'll link that back with backlink data as well, so you can see if it's a high domain authority website. So you can then mash it together and go, this podcast has a website that gets X amount of viewers, X amount of traffic. It's got a high domain authority. Its audience is all about PR and marketing or whatever the category. Yeah, boom, ticks my box. So it's not just 4.2 million podcasts that you're all looking at. You're just like, there's 10 podcasts. That's all I need to know about.
Brilliant. Oh, that sounds fascinating. I mean, I wish you luck with that, and I look forward to seeing what it...
Give it a spin.
So superb. So this is guest number 50-something. And we'll
need to go back in.
Yeah, we'll wrap up. But thank you so much for your time, Stuart. And I'm sure there were plenty of golden nuggets there that people will be writing down now. So
perfect.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully I can make somebody stop the car and pull over. Let me know.
Brilliant. Cheers, mate. Thanks for listening to PR in the Real World. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could subscribe to the podcast and leave us a quick review. Your support really helps spread the word and reach more marketing and PR professionals just like you. And don't forget to share this podcast with your colleagues or anyone who'd benefit from the insights we share. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for more tips, strategies and real world stories from the PR frontlines.